Welcome to Jammin' with Jason Mefford, a show where we discuss topics relevant to chief audit executives and professionals in audit, risk, and compliance. We discuss the technical and soft skills needed to navigate the minefields of organizations. You hear best practices and practical advice for helping you advance your career, and we'll even talk about music, mindfulness, and psychology, because we can. So sit back and relax while you listen to the #1 podcast in the world for internal auditors, unscripted and unedited. Hey, welcome everybody. I am excited to be with Sean Rosensteel. Now, we met actually, he was a guest on another podcast that I do. And I just got off on it and I said, you know what? I got to have him back on because we're so in line with a lot of the stuff that we're thinking about, and I just want people to be able to hear. So Sean Rosensteel is the author of The School of Intentional Living. And Sean, welcome. Maybe just give a little background. I love the title of the book. I love kind of the metaphor that you use, but kind of your whole story as well that I think is going to resonate with a lot of people about how to actually have an intentional life and get what you want. So take it away, man.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jason. Nice to see you again. Good to be here on the show. I appreciate it. So I grew up with a very, I think, conventional idea of success, like many of us do. And I was fortunate enough to go to college. And after graduating, I graduated with a degree in entrepreneurship, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. I was the first graduating class when they rolled out that program. And I actually took it by accident. I was a marketing major my senior year or my sophomore year. And I noticed that they had this entrepreneurship program that was available to sophomores, and it required 4 less credits than marketing.
Than your marketing.
So I'm like, that's me. I'm an entrepreneur. So I took it to have an easier senior year, graduated by the skin of my teeth, and went into business for myself. And, success to me back then was big homes and fast cars, fancy toys, status. Because I grew up with a lot of that, and a lot of my peers and their parents, it was just, I was a very fortunate upbringing, surrounded by a lot of those material things. And I ended up actually making some very negligent decisions, and I went bankrupt just 1 month before my wedding when I was 28 years old. And it was the first time in my life that I paused and took a breath and kind of reflected back on some of the decisions I had made leading up to that moment. And I recognized that while I was bankrupt in the financial column of my life, I was bankrupt everywhere else. I was spiritually bankrupt, mentally, emotionally bankrupt, physically bankrupt. I was a hot mess. Still am in certain ways, depending on the day, if I'm being honest.
Well, we all are. I mean, that's just part of being human, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was in a pretty dark place back then. And I write a little bit about that in the book and the introduction, but I think I developed this mindset in school. I was a C average at best student. Mm-hmm. And that was my identity. And I took that C average mindset into the real world. And I think, in school, I would learn something, regurgitate the information on a test just to get by. I was going through the motions, and then I would forget everything. And when I got into the real world, when I graduated, I was 21, 22, however old I was. I didn't appreciate learning. I didn't appreciate personal growth, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of people say, well, I stopped learning when I was done with school. I don't think I ever began learning. I don't think I ever began learning in the first place. So at 28, I had an incredible phone call with my parents. They have provided me with their unconditional love my whole life. I've been so fortunate in that category. And I had borrowed a little bit of money after I graduated. My parents helped me out, got on my own 2 feet with my business. And I can remember my attorney, when we were finalizing the paperwork, asking me, are there any other debts that you owe to anyone else, any company? We need everything out here. And I said, well, I withheld one of them. I'd like to keep that off. And he encouraged me to disclose 100%, disclose everything, strengthen the case, whatever it was. So I ended up including my parents and the money I owed them in the paperwork. And then it dawned on me as I was sitting in my car, I'll never forget this moment, because the whole world was going by. There was people outside, everyone's living their life, enjoying their life. And I just felt stuck. And I can remember this, pit in my stomach when I kind of had this vision of my poor mother walking to the mailbox in a few short weeks, knowing how the government is, probably a few long months. I mean, short weeks might be an exaggeration, that's a little optimistic, but I envisioned her opening that and just getting hit with a ton of bricks in the face. So I called my parents, and both of them got on the phone because I said, hey, I have some news to share. Can you get Dad, after my mom called? And I delivered the news, and I'll never forget, my dad said, Sean, no one is responsible for you but you. And then my mom chimed in with her sweet little tone, and she's like, I think it's time to find a quiet place and figure things out for yourself. Now, they had told me that, Jason, for as hundreds, if not thousands of times, for as long as I could remember. But I had the readiness that day. For whatever reason, it was the right time, and it really resonated with me, and I really took their guidance seriously. And, I was feeling like a failure, right? I mean, like sitting there, a lot of my peers had gone on to succeed at their own businesses. They had careers that were going in the right direction. They were getting married, having children, starting families. And I really felt like a failure. And I figured out, okay, if I don't take charge here and find a different way than the way I've been living, than this, conventional way I've been living my life, I'm going to be a mess, and I may not be here for much longer. So I just, like a lot of people do, I think I couldn't afford, online courses. That was 10 years ago. So online courses were, they were available, and they were very expensive. You could go to seminars and these 4-day things, but I didn't have any money to speak of. So I went to the local library, and I started checking out books, and I discovered learning, for the first time, I think, not again, I discovered personal development, personal growth. And I started very methodically improving every area of my life. And I've been very fortunate over the last 10 years. I've reconnected with, what I would call my higher power. I've strengthened my mental, emotional state. I'm in better shape today, knock on wood, than I have been probably ever. I have an incredible relationship with my wife. I have 3 beautiful, beautiful children. Great relationship with my parents, my siblings. I've reconnected with a lot of old friends that I lost along the way. I used to burn a lot of bridges. I was abusing alcohol, and I had a severe nicotine addiction. I was a wreck. So I overcame that. Alcohol, tobacco, none of those things or anything really rules my life necessarily that I'm aware of currently. Maybe the occasional Doritos at 8 p.m. Certain nights that, I got a little hold there, I think, still, but yeah. And then my wife and I have been very fortunate. We're able to build and grow a few companies, and we were acquired, a few of them, which was nice over the years. And yeah, I'm involved with some charitable organizations, on the board for one that I care, deeply about. So I just had a massive turnaround. And for me, that pivotal moment was just taking charge and recognizing that the path laid out, the template that I was living from, and I think the template that a lot of us are living from, this conventional template, it just didn't work for me. And the more and more I talked about it with people, and the more and more I was asked, hey, what are you doing over there? You seem to be getting some incredible results. I began actually teaching and coaching this to people about 5-6 years ago. I created what I would call just a very simple, kind of a real world approach at living intentionally. And then it was recommended years ago that I write a book someday. And I'm an avid reader. I've always appreciated and admired these, courageous authors for taking the time to clarify and organize their thoughts into the written word, the courage that they have to publish their work and expose themselves to public criticism and all the rest of it. So I thought there's no way I could do that. But then, of course, that idea, took hold a bit. And I didn't really know, Jason, how to write about intentional living because it's such a broad topic, number one. I think it means different things to all of us. I think we all have our own unique definition of intentional living. And I don't think there's a wrong definition, by the way. And I also think there's a lot of misconceptions around living intentionally and being a purpose-driven person and purpose in general. I think there's just a lot of different ideas and misconceptions. But late last year, I was doing a meditation. I got into a meditation practice a few years back, and an idea hit me like lightning, and I couldn't shake it. And it was this idea that perhaps my approach that I thought I came up with all by myself was inspired greatly by the formal education system, which was ironic because I wasn't ever a fan of the formal education system. I was never a big fan of school. I had a horrible experience because of my own attitude, probably. And I didn't want to give that thing credit. It was the last thing I wanted to do. But I'm like, the way that I'm working my day to day and my goals, just everything about my life, the way that I'm going about it in this approach really does stem from my experiences back in school. So how can I extract the foundational lessons that were taught in school and teach people and write about how to apply them in your life in the real world in a way that's incredibly relevant, incredibly relatable, and in a way that's flexible enough so everyone can take that information, make it their own, and run.
Yep.
And it's been neat because, being relatable about this topic was very important to me. I've read a lot of books or taken audio programs or been to events that are just, I can't relate at all with the person. I can't relate at all with their approach. And it's just, there's a conflict there for whatever reason, and I don't apply it. And I end up wasting my time. So having something that was relatable to people was very important. And I finally found my entry point late last year, which is really exciting. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback about it. They're like, this metaphor of school is so neat because it put me right back there. I know exactly what you're referring to. I know exactly how to take this tool, strategy, mindset, habit, whatever it is, and apply it today because I already know what that's about. So.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that I loved it too, because as we were talking before, I'm big on lifelong learning and have been, try to get, because there were a couple of things, as we were talking that you kind of brought up that I wanted to make sure and share with my audience too, because I've been trying to say some of this stuff, but maybe you can say it in a different way, that they're going to get, they've been listening to me forever. And a couple of them were, again, it's that metaphor of schooling. And I think, a lot of people that are listening, we're technical in nature, right? We've gotten a bachelor's, maybe a master's degree, multiple professional certifications. There's always been kind of an academic bend to it. But I think so much of the time that we stop learning when we stop going to school, right? And like you said, many of us don't actually learn in school because we don't have all of the four pieces of learning. We haven't actually acquired the skills, done the application of it, and then actually exercised or experienced it, right? To get the full learning. Usually it's just knowledge, take the test, knowledge, take the test, right? Even a lot of professional training is like that. Knowledge, take the test. You didn't learn it, right? At that point. And so, I love that idea of how, through your life and all of a sudden you kind of got that epiphany again of, hold it, learning is important for my whole life, right? And there's lots of different options out there. I mean, you said you went to the library first. It's a great place.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love everything you just said. So first of all, I think you need to give your listeners a little more credit. If they've been listening to you forever,
they should have heard it by now.
No, I'm saying if they've been listening to you forever, I think they're probably getting it, right? So no, I love what you're saying. And I think that happens to a lot of us. I was just talking about how in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which is for me a classic. I've been reading that for many years. I read it about once or twice a year. And he talks about that, how the vast majority of men, this is back in 28. So
20s. Yeah,
there's some things that maybe aren't, correct today, but the vast majority of men, once done with school, no matter what level it is, stop learning. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the major reasons that why people fail or feel like they fail or have a disaster in one area of life or the other. So I think what you're preaching is so important. I'm a firm believer. I think learning at the end of the day, for me, Jason, learning saved my life. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the intro, I was suicidal. I was a total mess. And learning was literally the key, and living intentionally, identifying what that was and figuring what that meant to me and then living that life was key for me. But I think that a lot of people take this continuing education, right, for their profession.
Yep.
That's one area.
That's only one. Because that was the other thing I wanted to bring up was, you talked about, having a holistic and full life. And there's many different aspects to that, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the first chapter of my book, I talk about subject areas back in school, and we have math, science, social studies, whatever. We're responsible for whatever it is, 5 to 8 subject areas. And we can't do well in 5 and flunk 1. We won't progress to the next grade. We won't make it to the next level. We won't grow or experience growth.
Mm-hmm.
So in the real world, we have life areas. We have the areas of our lives that matter most, and they're different for each of us. If you and I went to school at the same time, Jason, you would have a different curriculum in different subjects than I would have, because we're interested in different things.
Yep.
You might have this analytical risk assessment, kind of like stuff that, like,
you wouldn't have even signed up for that class, right?
God bless you. Unless you had a really cute teacher.
But of course I was taking all the art and psychology and other stuff too, right? Because
yeah, so, and I would have checked the box if it had less credits.
Yes, Mr. Entrepreneur Major.
Yeah. So anyways, but we're different. So if I said, Jason, tell me about the areas of your life that matter most, you might say, oh, I've got my health, and maybe that breaks down into my spiritual or my religious health, my mental, emotional health, my physical health. You might have your wealth, whatever that might look like, career, business, philanthropy, retirement, budgeting, income, revenue, I don't know. Then you have your relationships. Maybe you have a partner, significant other, you're married, you have children, maybe you have aging parents, maybe you have siblings, you have communities, memberships, associations you're involved with, whatever that looks like. We're all different. Mm-hmm. And we each have different areas of life. Just like in school, we study different subject areas. But the point is, we can't flunk one of them. Back in school, if you flunked, it's not the end of the world. You'll have to repeat the grade, right? Not ideal, but it's also not like a showstopper either. Well, in the real world, you go too far, too long, mm-hmm. way out of balance, 5, 10, 15 years, and you neglect an area that's important to you because you're too focused in your career, that could be disastrous. It could be a catastrophe. You could, your relationship could end.
Yep, and it does.
Your children could hate your guts. You could develop a habit that's going to kill you. Maybe it's a cancer-causing habit of some. You might have regret because you missed a window to spend time with some people who are aging. That to me, that scares me. And I kind of live like back then when all of this happened, I got this notion or this belief, I should say, that, I look at life, like I believe that in our final moments, many of us will wonder if we passed or failed at life, at this thing we call life. So while I believe life is a gift, I also look at life like it's a test. And I think a lot of us would be a lot more fulfilled and less stressed and more, feeling like we're balanced out a little bit if we looked at it from that angle, from that perspective, more frequently. Because I don't want to make it to my death. We were talking about the death of Ivan Ilyich earlier, yeah. And how, in the final moments of his life, he asked the question, what if my whole life has been wrong? Like that has haunted me from the moment those words just, shot right out from the page when I read that many years ago. And I'm into this stuff, Jason. This is how I think. I'm kind of a weirdo, but I want to live a full life. I want to experience everything I can. I want to be present in the moment with you on this podcast, with my kids at dinner, when I get home with my wife. Like, we all deserve to have a fully fleshed out, joyful life. And I think it's on each and every one of us to discover, well, what does that look like for me? Mm-hmm. What does that look like based on my past, based on my current condition, my existing circumstances, where I've arrived today? Like, it's never too late. And I think what's exciting, and I think, this, my book published back in late July. And I think one of the reasons why it's done so well, I'm a self-published author. I handled some of the marketing, all the marketing myself, got a little help from the wife, a little assist there. But I think one of the reasons why it's done so well and gained so much traction is because, just like that event of bankruptcy did for me 10 years ago, I think this pandemic is making people pause. It's this external circumstance. It's this, what in a movie would be called an inciting incident, right? Like in the first 90 seconds, there's an explosion, you get hooked, you get attached to the character.
Now we got to fix it.
Yeah, now how's he going to come out, out alive from this one? So I think this pandemic has been that inciting incident that's kind of woken a lot of people up from their slumber. and they're starting to reassess where they are and what they really want out of their life. And things are changing. The day-to-day is different. A lot of people are working from home. A lot of career people are getting a taste of what entrepreneurship is like because they're at home now trying to balance all this stuff out, find some privacy for the business, some focus time, balancing out interruptions from their significant other, children, whatever it might be. We're all going through some pretty uncertain times, and we're being forced to go beyond our comfort zone. But what I've found is that that's where the growth happens. You don't want to be too far out of your comfort zone, but if you have a circle and you draw a little X just beyond the circle, like, that's actually good for us. I think that's actually good for us to experience some new things every once in a while. And certainly there's a lot of bad things going on with the pandemic. We've lost tons of people worldwide, and we probably both have people close to us who we know, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners do too, that we've lost. I know a lot of people who haven't been able to be with their loved ones as they pass or transition. So I'm not saying this is like, oh, this is such a gift, let's celebrate this. It's an awful tragedy that's currently taking place. But I think if we can look at this and say, you know, there's a lesson here. You know, there's a lesson here for all of us to learn. You know, at the same time, I see a lot of good things happening. I see a lot of community. I see a lot of connectedness, even though it's via Zoom or whatever it is online. I feel like we're appreciating things that have always been around, but we haven't noticed before, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, because there's tons of stuff around us that we don't notice, right? Because even like you said, you know, as far as, you know, sometimes we get so enthralled with maybe one aspect of our life that other things fall apart, right? You know, and back to your school analogy, it's like, oh man, you know, if I love chemistry and I'm just like all into chemistry and I get an A+ in chemistry, but I ignore, you know, 3 of the other subjects and I fail in them, you know, in school, you don't get to pass forward. So it's the same thing, right? If you're doing great, let's say you're doing great in your career, right? But you're not taking care of your personal relationships that need to. Well, relationships sometimes end in divorce. That's like a failed relationship, right? Or the other side around. I see a lot of people too that, you know, maybe focus so much on some of these other areas that their career never goes where they want to. I mean, I know some great guys. They're amazing fathers and husbands, but they just can't make a living, you know, and they're scraping it out, you know, working 2 or 3 jobs to try to do it. Yeah, you know, and it's like, so we've got to have some of that balance in our life. And really, you know, like you said, it goes back to learning and the experiences and everything as well too, is it's like, we can learn how to communicate better. We can, you know, learn how to manage our finances better. We can learn, you know, new professional skills, maybe that make us more accessible in the marketplace, right? Yeah. There's all these different things that we can and should be learning, and then kind of focusing on, okay, what is most important in my life at this time, right? I mean, for me, I'm an empty nester. Kids are all gone, second marriage, but now I've got aging parent issues, right? So it's like every phase of life is a little bit different for each person. And I think it's great, you know, again, how you kind of put some of that together in the book of kind of assessing where you're at and what's most important now, yeah, as well, right? Because we have to make those choices in our life of what's most important for me now.
Yeah, it's great. And I think we need to remove this idea that it's a once a year occasion where we come up with a resolution or two. I like to see people do it more frequently, you know, reassess our lives more frequently. I think that's so important because your priorities are moving targets. And if you're in the habit of just staring at the to-do list and, you know, stressing out because it just keeps rolling over day to day to day, like, there might be a deeper reason why that to-do list is still sitting there, not done. And maybe those things
there is a deeper reason.
Maybe those things don't even matter because your values, priorities, things have shifted, but you haven't kind of recalibrated and caught up with those things yet. And I think also this idea of work-life balance, or just balance in general, I think that's a dangerous idea. It's a destination that we will never reach. And I think this idea of, I think if we could shift the destination to a verb instead of balance being this noun, if we can shift that destinations in our mind and say the destination is actually balancing. It's a constant, never ending state of balancing. Because to your point just a moment ago, you're in this phase of life now. So while these focal points or these areas that mattered are no longer relevant currently, now this is relevant. Like there's always something. I think we all think that we'll achieve balance someday, or hey, there's greener pastures on the other side. It's like, no, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Those expectations are going to crush you. And I think what we really need to start doing is like, why don't I just be in motion constantly with this? Because I'm just a lot happier when I'm balancing constantly. And I look at it like investing almost, right, Jason? It's like, what's the magic of investing over a lifetime? Have more upside days than downside, have more positive days than better days. You can't control everything. You're not going to have good days for an entire year straight. There's always going to be something that comes in out of your control and spoils your parade. I think the trick is to just simply have, more positive days than negative days, and just appreciate the fact that some of these things that take place that are inconvenient or whatever else, like you can find a lot of value, and you can find a lot of opportunity for growth in some of those, adversities.
Well, and I think because even the term balance, I love what you just said. I've never heard anybody say it like that, but go from balance to balancing. Because the idea of balance is, we think of a fulcrum or a teeter-totter, right? To where it's 50-50, right? Well, you're never going to have 50-50 life balance, work-life balance, because we spend more of our waking hours in our profession or doing whatever we're doing to be able to enjoy the other. But there does have to be the balancing, because again, if I'm this way, and I don't have any kids at home, but I love what I do, right? And so sometimes I love to work, right? I mean, there's almost sometimes nothing more than I would love doing this. So if my wife and I don't have something planned, she might choose to watch TV. I'm in here working because I love it, right?
Sure.
But there gets to be that point to where I get a little too far over, and she kind of, looks at me or gives me the little, I think you're working a little bit too much again, sort of a thing. And then to remind me to kind of come back, and it's like that throughout our whole life. Right. But I love that idea of stopping and assessing where you're at, figure out what works for you, I guess. Right. But I would say 90 days or less is usually probably good. I don't know if that's been your experience, but it's way better than trying to wait for a whole year.
Sure.
Because a lot of things can happen in between there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can do a lot of little short-term course corrects on a weekly basis. That's what I always recommend. It takes 5 minutes. I mean, I'm not sitting here recommending you take 5 hours on a Sunday, but it's very fast. But just some real short-term things to help you day to day, week to week. And then yes, every 90 days or so, I think the human brain is actually wired to lose focus after a 90-day period, which is very interesting. There's some science now to back up the data. So I think every 90 days to really climb the tree and, get some fresh perspective from 30,000 feet and see how your year is going. You may need to course correct some major projects along the way to help you do whatever you're looking to set out to do that year. But I want to go back to something. I love what you just said. Did you mention the fulcrum?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Yeah. And there's certain laws, I think, of the universe that we can't get around. Like, I'm not going to go up against nature, right? Like, that's not what I'm going to do because I'll lose every time. I respect nature. I respect the laws of the universe. I'm not going to trick gravity and beat gravity at some way. Well, you're talking about balance, and I look at that like a bike. Yeah, I mean, it's so elementary, but like, how do you not fall off the bike? You move, right? And you move forward. Most of us, I mean, there's certain people who know how to.
Bikes you can go backwards on. Unicycle, I guess, right? But,
well, those BMXers, and they can go backwards, but it's not me. But the point is, like, you move forward. You have to be in motion. It's that momentum that keeps the bike balanced.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Because if you can never, you'll fall over one way or the other unless you're moving. And that's the hardest thing, when you're teaching a kid to learn how to ride their bike, right? They first off, they want it to be stable, right? And then they'll
Counterintuitive.
start pedaling, right?
Yep.
And it's like, no, kid, that's why you push them and kind of get them going, start pedaling. And once they kind of get past that and realize, hold it, yeah, if I just pedal, then everything's going to be okay.
Right.
It's a good life lesson though, too, because sometimes we want to sit around and kind of wallow and, blah, 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 woe is me. But it's like, just make some progress and you're going to get the balance back.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I just taught, I've got a soon to be 7-year-old, 4-year-old, and 2-year-old. And we just taught this summer.
You got lots of bike riding lessons coming.
Yeah. A lot of bruises and scrapes this summer, mostly from me, but we taught my son, Oliver, and my daughter, Alice, how to ride their bikes. And Alice, who was 4, actually picked it up. She's incredible. Oliver, who's also incredible, not so much at a bike beginning, but it was hard for him because he didn't want me to let go. And he also didn't want to, it's counterintuitive, right? Because you're like, I don't want to fall and get hurt. That's why I'm not pedaling and moving. Mm-hmm. So like at a certain point, I'm like, look, buddy, you don't want to fall. I don't want you to fall, but you have to trust my guidance here. And I told him about the law of balance and the law of momentum. And I said, there's a law going on. You have to have faith that what I'm telling you works. And you have to get into this different habit versus putting your feet down. Because what he would do, he would hesitate, right? So he'd start going a little bit, but then he would want to take his feet off the pedals and, balance himself with his feet, but then his feet would get caught underneath the pedals and he'd crash.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you have to just go. You have to trust what I'm telling you. You have to trust yourself for only 5 or 10 seconds. And once you're going and you're in motion, the law of balance is going to kick in. You're going to be perfectly fine. But it's that risk reward, it's like you have to believe that the risk is worth the reward. So when I'm talking to people and I'm training, clients on like sitting down on a Sunday for 15 or 20 minutes, to review their calendar for the week, to minimize conflicts in their schedules, or to plan or prepare for a meeting that they might have Tuesday morning that, they would have rolled into like a hot mess 5 minutes late, sweating like crazy because they weren't prepared. When I'm recommending these things and then going over the areas of your life, giving yourself a grade, not 1 through 10, but A through E, give yourself a letter grade. Cause I used to do this and I would have 7s across the board. And I'm like, I'm fooling myself because I feel good about a 7 out of 10, but who am I kidding here? Like I'm just comfortable and I'm really slacking. So I started changing that to A through F. And then I even started calculating the GPA of my life once I had those on a 4.0 scale, right? So then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like a 1.8 out of 4. Like I'm doing worse today at, 32 years old. This was years ago than I was in school. Like I'm worse than a C average student. And this is my life. Mm-hmm. I only get one shot at this. I'm married. I think I had 1 child back then. So that was a big wake up call. And but I recommend people do that just weekly so they can catch things. It takes 2 minutes to do something like that. And to catch things before they get a little, momentum is a powerful force regardless of its polarity, right? So if you have momentum,
negative,
bingo. If you've got momentum in the wrong direction, the longer you're in that direction, whether it's unconscious or whatever, the harder it's going to be to reroute that momentum, pull it in a U-turn and go the other way.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we do that on the short term, just quick little check-ins to make sure, hey, you know what, I'm kind of off here, or hey, I had some, I was angry with my significant other this week. I had some outbursts with, him or her this week, or, I didn't get along with that employee that, I should really correct that. Maybe this week I can sit down and have a meeting with my direct report or with my manager or whatever, and just kind of clear the air a little bit, because it could happen again, and 10 times and I'm fired or she's fired, or, It's like these things, if left unchecked, can turn into like something cancerous, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, so having those little self check-ins is important. Like you said, doing it weekly. If you're a leader, you should probably be doing a little bit of it each day, as well, so that you're prepared for the next day. And thinking about it in all these different facets of your life as well. But I know too, because one of the things we started talking about before we hit record that I kind of wanted to wrap up on, here too, is this whole idea that you had, because it's important for us to do this individually and we should be accountable and responsible to do it. But this whole idea that you had around extracurricular activities, with your school metaphor, and getting involved with like-minded people, I wanted to kind of wrap up with, because I think, at least for me in my life, I've seen that when I've been involved in those type of communities, it's helped me keep that momentum, or helped me get going, right? It's like if your son had gone out and tried to learn how to ride his bike by himself, good luck, right? But because you were there was a community, if you will, you were helping him, you know how to do it, you're helping to bring him along too. That it seems like that's the cherry on the top of the sundae, if you will, that when we finally have something like that in a support system too, then the power of many is greater than the power of one.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Communities give you accountability. They give you coaching. They give you camaraderie. It's so important. And I learned this very late in life, because my parents were religious enough, but they gave me a choice, and I wasn't very religious.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never really had, like, I didn't go to church every Sunday like a lot of my peers did, my parents did. And I never really understood the value of a community up until probably 8-9 years ago. And when you can surround yourself to what you suggested, with people who are like-minded, and they are looking to, they have the same desires that you have, looking to, move towards the same things when they're struggling with the same things that you are. I talked about Napoleon Hill earlier, but he talks about the power of the mastermind, and how one brain plus one brain doesn't equal 2, it equals 3 or more, because there's just this magic that takes place. And you don't need a big community. You could do 2 people. I mean, I have accountability meetings with certain people in my inner circle every 2 weeks. And it's 90 minutes of magic, because I have blind spots, they have fresh perspectives, vice versa. It's an amazing meeting that takes place. So you don't have to have a big community, but it is so important. And I think the bigger the community, the better, because you get more perspective. You get more of that camaraderie. You get more accountability. You get more coaching and guidance. And you have more people that can really empathize with whatever it is you're struggling with. Mm-hmm. Like years ago, I looked at, what's the old saying? Like, you're the average of your 5 closest friends.
Jim Rohn. Yeah. Jim Rohn used to say
Jim
that.
Rohn.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, I need to make some changes here. And now I'm so blessed to say, like, I look at some of the people I connect with on a daily basis. And I think what's difficult, and I struggled with this for a while, it's like, my wife is not into growth. I mean, she is to a certain degree, but for me, it's like an addiction. Mm-hmm. I love it. I love the pursuit of knowledge. In fact, every once in a while, she had this issue, and I don't remember what it was, about 6 months ago, but she had like this burning desire to just get the information she needed and fix it. And for like an entire week, man, she was consuming information. She's just devouring books. I was just like, wow, you're on fire. I love to see you this way. She was inspired.
Yeah.
And I want to live my life like that always. And what's neat about being in the real world and having multiple areas is, like, life can be fascinating if you know what to look for and if you know what to tune into. And when you can get to a place where you're open to belonging to a community. For a long time, I was like, I'm just independent. I'm going to do this on my own. For a long time, I'm like, I don't need anyone's help.
Well, because I hear that from lots of people, and it's like, I don't know if it's our ego, that's thinking, well, I already know it. I don't need somebody else. I'm not sure if it's really the ego, or if it's just that we're scared to admit to other people that we're human.
Yeah.
And we don't have everything together.
I think it's both.
I think it's more that we're probably more scared than anything.
It's our unwillingness to become vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ego too. I mean, if you really want to boil it down, it is ego. It can work in, different ways, but absolutely. We're in our own way with that. But I think if you are feeling like a community might be something that could benefit you. Because one of the other things, Jason, is like, I'm a big fan, we're talking about laws today, right? I'm a big fan of the law of reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found is if I want to get something, like if there's something out there I want to get, I wanted to get to the next level in my business, or I want to get a book published or written, or I want to get to the next level with my relationship or anything. If I ever want to get something, I always like, my go-to place is like, how can I give it first? Like, how fast and how rapid can I give this thing I want to get to other people? Because the law of reciprocity magically kicks in and all of a sudden it gets returned in spades. So what I love about communities, and the ones that I feel most connected with and the ones that I'm most fulfilled by, are the ones where I go all out and participate and I engage and I really try to add value to the other members of the community. Because I find that just attracts all the solutions and all the connections and all the relationships I need. I mean, selfishly, I try to make the first move and give, because I just trust that whether it's karma, you know, whatever you want to call it, I just trust that it'll come back. And if it doesn't, I'm okay. I'm okay, because I delivered some value. I tried to help someone else out. I tried to serve to the best of my ability, and I feel good about myself. I wasn't sitting, you know, in the corner, just not participating because of my ego. Right. So yeah, community is awesome. And what's so neat is, because I hear people, and I wrote about this in the book, you know, if I wanted to get rid of my fear of public speaking, I used to freak out. So I joined Toastmasters for about 18 months, and that community was unbelievable. There are like knitting communities in all local areas. There are cooking classes. Like, there's just anything you want, you can find a community for. And now that it's COVID, because I hear a lot of, well, I can't do that anymore. Yes, you can. There are online communities, LinkedIn, Facebook, any major platform, you can find communities where you can tap into and work with other people and share things with other people who are like-minded, going after the same things, struggling with the same things. And you can make some lifelong friendships. And back to what I was saying about my wife, I used to have a really hard time that she wasn't into the same things that I was into. And I wasn't respectful of that. And I was always like, gosh, you know, if she would only be more growth oriented, if she would only be, and I'm like, you know, I need to respect and appreciate and love her for wherever she is. She does that to me. I'm a nut with this stuff, and she loves me just the way I am. So I need to love her just the way she is, you know, and for that sort of thing, I love communities, because I value that discussion and going below the surface on certain topics, on most topics. But not everybody in my life, not all my friends, not all my family members are willing to do that. And that's okay. But if I can identify the right community, now I can just, you know, it's like you're on fire in the right communities, because you finally found your tribe, so to speak, right?
Yep. Well, and that's why it's so important. And that's why I've been trying to push it. And I mean, again, you're just, you know, reiterating the importance of it, that, you know, whatever is holding you back, go out and find a community, you know, again, and it doesn't, you know, yeah, you can have them for your, you know, professional life, obviously, but there's so many different facets of us as humans, right? That if you want to go join a knitting club, go join a knitting club.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to go take yoga or painting or, you know, whatever, you know, if it's a craft kind of thing, or maybe it's, you know, I love going to things like Renaissance fairs and, you know, battle reenactments, you know, because those communities, you know, like Civil War reenactment groups, I mean, these people like live and breathe this thing when they go into, it's live action role play, right? At that point, because they have this whole persona around it. And that to me, it's so fascinating and wonderful, right? That we all have communities where we can go. We just got to reach out and do it. But that gives us a more whole life.
Sure. I love that. Yeah. I love that. You can find anything. I'm obsessed with pinball.
Ah.
You know, it's like,
is that how you came across Phil too? He's a pinball wizard.
So he thinks he is.
He thinks he is. I got to see you two play.
He is yet to meet me. No, but what's interesting, Jason, is I met Phil back in 2012. He was he was just an incredible ambassador for a business that my wife and I started back then. But that's how I met him. And we've known each other for 8 years, and we've done some podcast things back and a lot of collaborations. And just like 2 months ago, I realized I learned that he was a pinball. Like, that never came up for us.
Never came up before.
Yeah, it's just crazy. But I'm more into restoring them than playing them. But I like both, and I don't have a lot of time anymore. But yeah, I can find. I mean, anywhere I go, I can literally. When I used to travel, I would put a little alert up on a pinball app, and I would have. I'm not kidding. Dozens of invites of pinball enthusiasts to come over into their personal private collection in their home. And when I would travel, I would look for people around the hotel I was staying at. I'd put out the alert, and I'd have plans that evening. I mean, you can find communities for anything you can possibly imagine. I mean, it sounds funny, but your war reenactments, I mean, anything.
Everything.
Yeah, which is so neat, because then we realize, okay, like we're a little bit of a freak, but not that much, because all these other people are doing it too, right?
Yeah. Well, and it provides us a much more, full life, which, again, I mean, I know that, our discussion today wasn't as technical as some of the stuff that I get into, or as professionally, maybe motivated or mindset wise, but so important for us to live a full and happy life, right? Because just being one dimensional, just like you talked about in the school analogy, isn't going to get you through. We're multi-dimensional people, and the more actual connection and that we have with other people, whether it's through these communities or what have you, the more that we learn and grow and develop in all areas of our life, right? Absolutely. The better off we're going to be, the better off we leave this planet whenever we end up kicking off too. Yeah. Right. Is make the, I can't remember if it was you too that, that were saying, make this world a better place, or when you walk into it. Yeah, it was you. Yeah. I think you said that before too, right? When you walk into a room, leave it better than you entered.
Yeah. My grandmother always used to tell us little kids, hey, because we would, come into the room, leave it a mess, walk out. She'd be like, hey,
get back here.
Every time you walk into a room, leave it in better condition than you found it. And I try to, she's no longer with us, but I try to apply that philosophy to my entire life. And I just simply swap out the word room with the world, with the planet, so I'd like to think that, and that for me is part of the definition of intentional living, is leaving this world in better condition than when you arrived. Yeah. And I think we all have the potential to do that.
Well, we do, if we, are responsible, and we actually try to do things intentionally. And if that is our intention, then we can accomplish it.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Well, Sean,
thank you
for coming on. It was great talking to you again, my friend. And yeah.
Likewise. Right. I hope your listeners don't mind that we went a little bit off the normally.
If they do, it doesn't matter. They know I'm kind of, I'm, what'd you say, a weirdo, right? Because it's important, because I want people to live the best life that they can.
Yeah.
Part of that's their professional life, but so much more of your total life. If that's all you focus on, you can go down a really bad path. But the more holistic we try to live in general, and plug into all these different things, keep checking back in, make sure that we're doing, leaving the room better than we entered, then it's great. So I appreciate you talking, taking the time today, and for putting out the book and the good that you're doing in the world as well. So
thank you.
Thanks
for having me, Jason. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk to you later, man.
Okay.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you later on the next show. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy at ondemand.criskacademy.com. And that's C as in the letter C, riskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you also will have access to the video version of today's show. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.